Mother-in-law threatens to disinherit us for not having kids, loses it when we relocate after husband's promotion. I am 31 years old, and I have been married to my husband Brandon for 5 years. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot. My parents have always been easygoing. They never pressured me into anything I was not ready for. If I said I needed time, they respected that. But my mother-in-law, Linda, total opposite. From the moment Brandon and I started dating, she made it her mission to rush us down the aisle. According to her, we were already over 25, and it was embarrassing for her to tell her friends that her son was still unmarried. She nagged and complained, acting like it was a disgrace. The second we got married, she switched gears. Now, her entire focus was on us having a baby. Now, we got married because it felt right for us, not because of her nagging, and I was simply not ready for a child. Brandon and I sat her down, explained that we were waiting until the time was right, but it was like talking to a brick wall. She would not let it go. For the past 5 years, she's been pushing us relentlessly, trying everything in her power to pressure us into having a kid. Brandon's dad, Tom, told him to just let it go. He said his wife ran the household, and arguing with her would only create drama. I get standing by your wife, but this was beyond ridiculous. Linda did not care about what we wanted. She only cared about what she could brag about. Her friends saw a bunch of old ladies in their 60s sat around gossiping about their grandchildren, their daughters-in-law, and who was doing what in their families. She wanted something to show off. Brandon has told her countless times to stop, but she does not listen. He even talked to Tom, hoping he would step in, but the man has no spine. He refused to say anything. He just kept repeating that we should keep quiet to keep the peace. At first, we tried to avoid conflict, but over time, it got harder to ignore. 2 weeks ago, I finally snapped. They came over for dinner, and while I was in the kitchen cooking, Linda went on and on about some herbal tea that supposedly helps with fertility. I lost my patience. I turned to her and said, "If you are so desperate for a baby, why not have one yourself instead of harassing me?" That shut her up, and honestly, I do not regret it not after what happened today. For the next couple of visits, she did not mention pregnancy. Brandon and I were relieved. She and Tom live nearby, and she never respected our boundaries. She would just show up whenever she wanted. But after my comment, her visits became less frequent. When she did come over, she barely acknowledged me and only spoke to Brandon. I started worrying that I had pushed things too far. We could not afford to completely fall out with her, not if we wanted to stay on good terms for the inheritance. I know it sounds selfish, but they are well off, and Brandon figured that having that money one day would make life easier. It was not the noblest reason for tolerating her nonsense, but it was practical. Since we lived nearby anyway, it did not seem worth starting a war over her annoying behavior. We figured we only had to endure it for a few more years. Brandon had been working toward a big promotion, and once he got it, we would finally have the financial freedom to move out. The house we were in was a wedding gift from Tom and Linda, which is why it was so close to them. But once we had enough saved, we were gone. Even Brandon could not stand living this close to his mother. She was always up in our business. And then, 3 days ago, it happened. The promotion Brandon had been working toward for 5 years finally came through. His hard work paid off. Not only was he getting his own office, but his salary was going up way up. Brandon works at a bank, and I am a real estate agent. We had always been comfortable, but we were not what you would call wealthy. But now we were. I do not mean to sound arrogant, but Brandon earned this. He spent years sacrificing his free time, working late into the night, while I kept things running at home on top of my own job. We both put in the effort. We deserved this. The best part? We could finally move out. No more Linda dropping by unannounced. No more lectures about babies. No more feeling like we had no space of our own. Brandon loves his parents, but even he admitted his mother was overbearing. He was relieved when she stopped coming around as much after I told her off. So, to celebrate, we invited them over for dinner. One last meal before we started looking at houses. Since I work in real estate, I already had a few properties lined up. Maybe it was a little soon, but we were excited. We wanted to share our news. Linda arrived in a mood. She barely looked at me, barely spoke. At the dinner table, it was mostly Tom making conversation while Linda sat there, sulking. I ignored it, let her be miserable. After dinner, we were about to make our announcement when Linda suddenly stood up and said she had something important to say. We let her go first, figuring it would be nothing serious. I wish I could say I was surprised by what she said next, but honestly, I was just annoyed. She looked Brandon dead in the eye and announced that she had removed him from her will. And that was not all. She was going to make sure Tom did the same unless we had a child within a year. She even said she did not care if we adopted or used a surrogate. She just wanted a grandchild. She said we were an embarrassment, a disgrace. She claimed we were depriving her of her right to be a grandmother, and if we did not change that soon, we would not see a single penny from them. Instead, all their money would go to charity. The whole thing was so absurd that neither Brandon nor I knew how to respond. Even Tom looked stunned, meaning she had not even told him about this plan beforehand. I had expected her to be mad after I snapped at her weeks ago, but I never thought she would go this far. The thing is, a few months ago, losing that inheritance might have actually stung. But now, Brandon was making more than enough. We did not need her money. We did not need her at all. So, as soon as she finished her little speech, I stood up and told her exactly why we had invited them over. I told her about Brandon's promotion, and I watched her face fall. For years, she had criticized him, saying he was not successful enough. And now, he had his own office, a powerful position, and a huge paycheck. And she had just cut herself out of his life completely. I looked her straight in the eye and told her I was not about to let her ruin this moment for us. If she thought we were such a disgrace, then she should just leave. She was completely caught off guard. I think she realized right then and there that she had made a huge mistake. If we moved away, if we cut her off, she would not even get the chance to brag to her friends about Brandon's success. That, for her, was worse than us not having a child. Suddenly, she was all smiles, trying to take back what she said. I always knew you had it in you, she gushed. Grandkids can wait. Brandon had been silent through all of this, but now he had had enough. When his mother reached out to hug him, he took a step back. And then, for the first time in his life, he truly let her have it. I told my in-laws to leave, keeping my voice steady and calm so they would actually listen. My mother-in-law, Linda, looked like she was about to cry, and I could tell she wanted to stay and talk things out with Brandon. But I was not about to let this night spiral into an even bigger disaster. I told her she could talk to him later when everyone had cooled down. They finally left. Tom, my father-in-law, paused at the door and muttered an apology, but at that point it meant nothing. He had plenty of chances to stand up for his son over the years, but he always let Linda bulldoze over him. A half-hearted sorry was too little, too late. Once they were gone, I turned my attention to Brandon. He was a wreck, completely drained, like someone had punched all the air out of him. He had spent his whole life dealing with his mother's constant expectations, her demands, her guilt trips. And now, things were crumbling beyond repair. I spent the next hour just trying to calm him down. There was nothing either of us could do to fix this. Linda and Tom had their whole lives to be supportive, loving parents, but they had made their choices. And now, when Brandon had finally found success, I did not think they deserved to be part of it anymore. Linda had spent years pushing him, making him feel like he was never good enough. And Tom, he just stood by and let it happen. That is why, when Linda called me about 30 minutes later, I did not even let her get a word in before shutting her down. I told her straight up that after what she said tonight, she had lost the right to call and talk to Brandon whenever she pleased. If she wanted to say something to him, she had to go through me first, because I was done letting her hurt him. She did not like that one bit. She immediately launched into an argument, but I was not about to sit there and listen. The second her tone turned nasty, I hung up. A few minutes later, my phone lit up with a string of text messages. According to her, I was the problem. She said I was the reason Brandon was pulling away, that I had been poisoning his mind against his family. She even brought up the past, saying I had been too old when I married him and that now I was refusing to have a baby, keeping her from being a grandmother. She accused me of only caring about money, claiming that I had turned Brandon into some kind of greedy, materialistic man who put his career above family. In her mind, this promotion meant more to us than a child ever could. It stung. Even though I knew she was just trying to guilt trip me, it still made me feel like garbage. Maybe I was materialistic. Maybe Brandon was too. But we had always tried to balance things, to value our relationships as well as our ambitions. We had never depended on his parents for anything. We never asked for money, never expected help from them. The inheritance was a long-term thing, and if that had been our main reason for keeping them in our lives, we would have been angling for financial support all along. But we never did. We stuck around because, at the end of the day, they were still his family. That was supposed to mean something. Now, though, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. It was too late to talk to my friends about this, and even if I did, I knew they would take my side no matter what. And I did not want to wake Brandon, not when he had already been through so much tonight. But I could not shake this nagging feeling. What if I had handled this all wrong? What if somehow I was the one ruining his relationship with his parents? I did not want him to cut ties with them just because of me. Was I the one who had messed up? Was I the bad guy here? Update 1. It has been 2 days since that disaster of a dinner, and we still have not spoken to my in-laws. Not that they have not tried. Linda has been reaching out non-stop, but Brandon is done. Completely 100% done. We talked about everything the next morning, and I showed him the messages his mother had sent me. He read them all, and I could see how much they hurt him. Not because he believed them, but because deep down this was just more proof that his mother would never change. Then he told me something that honestly shocked me. He admitted that the only reason he had kept in touch with them for this long was because of the inheritance. That was it. Nothing more. Had it not been for the money, he said he would have moved away and cut contact years ago. They had never been there for him emotionally. They had never supported him, never made him feel valued. So the least they could do was let him have their wealth when they no longer needed it. And now, with his new job and salary, he did not even need that anymore. His mother had already removed him from the will, so there was no point in trying to fix things. There was nothing left to salvage. I will admit, hearing him say that made me feel better, because it meant I was not the reason he was pulling away. He had been done with them long before I ever entered the picture. After that, we agreed that cutting them off was the best thing for us. Linda did not take the hint, though. She kept texting me, blaming me for everything, insisting that I convince Brandon to talk to her. I had no idea how she expected me to help her when she spent the entire time blaming me. If she had been a better mother, her son would not be shutting her out today. If she had been a better mother-in-law, I would not be standing in her way. But she failed at both, and now she had no one to blame but herself. Update 2. Brandon and I finally picked a house, and we are set to move in the next few days. He called Tom to let him know, and Tom was upset but accepted it. He asked Brandon to reconsider, but there was no changing his mind. Brandon told him exactly what had led to this. He said that his entire life, he had been waiting for his father to take a stand, to put Linda in her place just once, but he never did. He just stood by, afraid to say a word against her, and now he had no right to complain about how things had turned out. Tom was upset, but nothing could have prepared us for how Linda reacted. To say she lost her mind would be an understatement. She showed up at our house, desperate to talk to Brandon. For some reason, he decided to let her in. He said he wanted to end this once and for all. I stayed in the bedroom, not wanting to be part of the conversation. I do not know exactly what was said, but afterward, Brandon told me the basics. She started off by trying to play the victim, saying she had only ever wanted the best for him. When that did not work, she tried to guilt trip him, saying she had sacrificed so much for him and that this was how he repaid her. When Brandon did not budge, she turned nasty. She accused him of abandoning his family, of being cold-hearted. She even tried to gaslight him, saying she had only been helping him improve all these years. But Brandon was done. He told her the truth. She never cared about his happiness. She only cared about appearances, about impressing her friends, about having something to brag about. And that is when she finally broke down. She started crying, screaming, begging him to stay. When he refused, she became completely unhinged. I heard the yelling from the bedroom and came out just in time to see her throwing cushions and stomping her feet like a toddler. Tom arrived just in time to drag her out of there. It was over. Brandon looked exhausted, but relieved. He told me that letting her in was a mistake. She would never change. And honestly, I could not wait to move. If she had truly cared about him, she would have been worried about his happiness, not about how he made her look to her friends. They argued for a while, and eventually, Linda burst into tears, demanding that he cancel our move. She claimed she could not bear the thought of him being so far away, and that she was not willing to let her son just walk out of her life like that. Brandon stood his ground. He told her that he was a grown man, capable of making his own decisions, and he did not need her approval. That was when she lost it completely. She started wailing, shouting so loudly that I could hear her from the bedroom. I stepped out to see what was happening, and what I saw was almost surreal. Linda was completely hysterical, grabbing throw pillows and flinging them across the room, sobbing uncontrollably while Brandon stood there, staring at her like she had lost her mind. He was already dialing his phone, probably calling Tom to come deal with this mess. I tried to step in and talk her down, hoping to de-escalate the situation, but the second I opened my mouth, she turned on me. Suddenly, I was the villain. She pointed at me, her voice shrill, accusing me of brainwashing her son, stealing him from her, filling his head with nonsense. She swore that before I came into the picture, he was a good Sona-son who listened to his mother. That was when things officially spiraled out of control. Fortunately, Tom arrived just in time. He rushed in, grabbed Linda by the arms, and started pulling her toward the door. She resisted, still sobbing and shouting, but he managed to drag her out before she could make an even bigger scene. It was unsettling to witness, but mostly I was just relieved she was gone. Brandon and I stood there in silence for a moment, both of us still processing what had just happened. Then he sighed and ran a hand over his face. "That was a mistake," he muttered. "I should not have let her in." He was right. She had made it crystal clear she did not see him as a grown man making his own choices. She still thought of him as a little boy she could manipulate, a puppet she could control. I could not pack up and move fast enough. Update 3. I have some amazing news. Turns out, all the emotions I have been dealing with lately, the stress, the anger, the frustration, there was another reason for it. I am pregnant. Yeah, I took a test a few days ago, and I was honestly in shock. But after it sank in, I was overwhelmed with happiness. Brandon and I had always planned on having kids when the time felt right, and now it finally does. Everything is falling into place. First, Brandon's promotion. Now, a baby. It is like everything is coming together at the perfect time. Brandon is beyond thrilled. We are stepping into a brand new chapter of our lives, and we could not be happier. Of course, we have not told Linda and Tom, and we are not going to. In fact, we have blocked them completely. No more texts, no more calls, no more surprise visits. Brandon even warned his father that if Linda showed up at our house again after her latest meltdown, he would not hesitate to call the police. He made it clear that he is done. He does not want to fix things. He does not want to give them another chance. And for once, Tom actually agreed to respect his decision even though I could tell he was not happy about it. Honestly, I feel a little bad for him, but not for Linda. Because the truth is, she did this to herself. If she had just been Pashenev, she had just backed off and let us live our lives, she could have been part of this moment. She could have been here to celebrate with us, but instead, she chose to act like a complete lunatic. And now, she has lost the privilege of being in her grandchild's life. And honestly, I am relieved. Because after everything that has happened, I do not want her anywhere near me while I am pregnant. I do not need that kind of stress. And I definitely do not want her crazy energy around my child. We have already started the moving process, and I am making sure that no one or not even Tom knows our new address. The last thing I need is Linda showing up at our doorstep, demanding to be part of our lives again. Brandon and I are focused on our future now. No drama, no interference, just happiness. I cannot wait to become a mother.